So just as we were getting on, Christy and I were touching base on the interview, and she asked me this question, how do you define shame? And in some of the other interviews, we haven't really gone into depth on how we all define shame. And so I'm actually going to turn that around. And Christy, would love to hear from you how you define shame as then we start to get into what is the shame that you've experienced or that you've seen clients experience and turn it into the shine. But first, let's start with what is shame to you?
So I think it is a really important question because for a lot of us, we don't want to talk about shame. Even if we don't have a definition for it, there is something about it that just feels yucky in our systems. And a lot of us see it as a source of conflict where we want to, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, the different ways that we respond to conflict in our lives. And so, my definition of shame that I live and work with is not my definition. So, there is a thought leader in my space named Dr. Brene Brown. And, hopefully some people have heard of her. If you are hearing me talk about her name and you haven't heard of her yet, I'm going to invite you to Google her. Her TED Talk on vulnerability and shame is one of the most watched TED Talks on earth. In fact, last time I checked, one of the top 5 most watched TED Talks on earth, 65 million views. Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown. And I am incredibly privileged that in 2018, I was one of 50 coaches globally handpicked by Brene and her team to take her work on shame and vulnerability and empathy out of the social workspace. She's a research PhD out of Texas, out of that space, and bring it to corporations and look at it through the lens of how do we build more courageous leaders in the workplace and in the world, and how do we meet people where they are and where we spend, most of us anyway, the majority of our time of our lives at work. So the definition that I learned from my time with Brene is making a really clear distinction of how do we build shame resilience and how do we live more courageous and authentic lives and learn to understand shame and move through it. So the way when somebody asks me what shame is, as you just did, I usually start by describing how it is not guilt.